What's going on with the American economy? Foreclosures are everywhere, unemployment is skyrocketing, and it looks like this may only be the beginning. As a result, most Americans fear that our cherished basic freedoms and way of life are under direct attack as our standard of living sinks like a stone. But could it be that all these problems were foreseen 100 years ago by L. Frank Baum, the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz? Why is this just coming out? Because when the MGM movie The Wizard of Oz was made in 1939, significant changes were made from L. Frank Baum's original book version written 40 years earlier in 1899.
In the book version of The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's slippers are made of silver, as opposed to in the film version where Dorothy's slippers are made of ruby. You take away the silver slippers on the gold or yellow brick road, and all of the other symbolism tends to be lost.
And an SEC employee, quote, knows something is up. The Wall Street Journal reported that you and Mr. Paulson attended 2 weekly meetings of the Financial Stability Oversight Board and refused or declined to disclose the seriousness of the problems that were being faced by the Bank of America and Merrill Lynch at that time. What would you say to the majority of this Congress who has now co-sponsored the bill to require audits of the Federal Reserve? Do you feel that the Federal Reserve is operating with too much secrecy and too much refusal to disclose information that you have to other federal banking regulators?
The Federal Reserve has made enormous strides in the last year under my chairmanship to expand the information that we release. We release monthly information on all the various programs that we have. We've developed a website and a monthly report that involves all kinds of information. We think we are quite transparent. We are happy to work with Congress if they have further concerns about any of our programs. We are more than happy to work with you to make sure that you're comfortable that they are well managed and are serving a public purpose.
Do you think it would cause problems for the Fed or for the economy if that legislation was to pass?
My concern about the legislation is that if the GAO is auditing not only the operational aspects of our programs and the details of the programs, but is making judgments about our policy decisions, that would effectively be a takeover of monetary policy by the Congress, a repudiation of the independence of the Federal Reserve, which would be highly destructive to the stability of the financial system, the dollar, and our national economic situation.
Now let's see what the experts say about our current problem, then look at our history so we can understand what L. Frank Baum was trying to say in his book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Well, it's no secret to any American that we're living in very precarious times. Americans are being robbed blind, and they don't even know who's doing the robbing.
I mean, we clearly are, in a bus and we're heading for the edge of a cliff. And there still is probably time to change course. The only problem is the people driving the bus don't realize that there's a cliff there yet.
If the problem that's grinding the economy to a halt is too much debt, and if nobody in the government and either party is looking at solving the debt problem, then the answer is it's going to go into a depression as far as the eye can see.
And so we're going to have a massive, massive recession, or let's call it a depression, while the economy rebalances away from a service sector economy towards a good producing economy, away from a borrow and spend economy to a save and produce economy. That's what we need to do. We can't get from where we are to where we need to be without a severe depression.
What can government do? The sad answer is, under our current monetary system, nothing. It's not going to get any better until the root cause of the problem is understood and addressed. There isn't enough stimulus money in the entire world to get us out of this hole. Why? Debt. The national debt is just like our consumer debt. It's the interest that's killing us.
Peter Koch with Bloomberg Television. Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up just on your last response there. Given the fiscal cliff, is it possible that if the policymakers were not to agree to some sort of deficit deal by the end of this year, and we were to go over the fiscal cliff, that the size of these asset purchases could indeed grow in response to that? And more specifically, you coined the phrase fiscal cliff, and I wanted to get your take on whether you still feel it's the most appropriate language to describe what would happen in the beginning of the year. There are some Americans who may be alarmed by the language. Some economists say it's more of a slope. Do you still feel it's appropriate, given the circumstances, the fiscal contraction that would come if there is no deal?
Well, so to the first part of your question is if the economy actually went off the fiscal cliff, our assessment, the CBO's assessment, outside forecasters all think that that would have very significant adverse effects on the economy and on the unemployment rate. And so on the margin, we would try to do what we could. We would perhaps increase a bit.
You must understand that every penny, every dollar we have in circulation is created as an interest-bearing debt.
So what is the national debt? When government spends more than it collects in taxes, it has to borrow the difference by selling interest-bearing IOUs, such as U.S. bonds. When a U.S. bank buys a $100 U.S. bond, it gets to loan out 10 times that amount. So the bank not only gets back the $100 plus interest from the federal government, it gets to loan out another $1,000 it doesn't have and charge additional interest. Banks are allowed to create this extra money out of thin air. That's why bank buildings are the biggest in every town on the planet. This system of lending way more than you have is called fractional reserve lending. Almost all our money is created by banks, lending it to people, to companies, or to government. As we'll see, there is a better way for a government to get money. Simply
but I just want to again be clear that we cannot offset the full impact of the fiscal cliff. It's just too big, given the tools that we have available and the limitations on our policy toolkit at this point. On terms of the terminology, well, and people have different preferences about what they want to call things. I think it's a sensible term because I think of the fiscal policies providing support to the economy. If fiscal policy becomes very contractionary, the economy will, I think, go off a cliff. I think it's reasonable to be concerned about this. I don't buy the idea that a short-term descent off the fiscal cliff would be not costly. I think it would be costly, and in fact, we're already seeing costs. Why is it that consumer confidence dropped so sharply this week? Why is it that small business confidence dropped so sharply? Why are the markets volatile? Why is business investment among its weakest levels during the recovery? I think all of these things, at least to some extent, can be traced to the anticipation and the concern about the fiscal cliff. And I think that we don't know exactly what would happen, but I think there's certainly a risk that it could be serious, and therefore I think it's very important. The most helpful thing that I think Congress administration can do right now is find a resolution that, on the one hand, achieves long-run fiscal sustainability, which is critical, absolutely critical for a healthy economy, but also avoids derailing the recovery, which is currently in process.
Issue it without debt for the benefit of all citizens equally. Abraham Lincoln did it, Ben Franklin did it, Jefferson wanted to do it. Honest Americans have fought against this bank-controlled debt money system throughout American history. But unless we change it soon, most of our freedoms will soon be lost in a tidal wave of debt. 75 years ago, an employee of the Atlanta Federal Reserve explained the importance of the debt money system and how it can strangle our economy. Someone has to borrow every dollar we have in circulation. If the banks create ample money, we are prosperous. If not, we starve. When one gets a complete grasp of the picture, the tragic absurdity of our hopeless position is incredible. It is the most important subject intelligent persons can investigate and reflect upon.
Our government should never go into debt. It doesn't need to go into debt. A government can issue the money it needs.
That's absolutely right. Under our current money system, the government has to borrow our money into existence, then pay interest on it. That's why they call it the national debt. All our money is created out of debt. Politicians who focus on reducing the national debt without trying to actually fix the underlying cause probably don't understand what the national debt really is. To reduce the national debt would be to reduce our money, and there's already not enough money for the average person. Why haven't we heard this before? Because most of the media and Congress are beholden to the big banks for loans. Yes, Congress still appropriates money, but where do they get it? Again, what they can't raise from taxes, they borrow from banks. In 2009, Congress will spend over $4 trillion, but they will have to borrow half of it. But on top of that, in 2008-2009, Congress bailed out the biggest banks by giving them nearly $1 trillion. The worst part is, we aren't just giving the money away, we're borrowing it to give it away.
það nú þessu gas hjá mig? Hvað settu með það?
Frá lögreglu, þið eru komin í fyrir lokanir og ef þið komið nær, ef ykkur eru koma hérna nær, þá er lögreglan tilbúin að flytta hittorð og táragassi og kylfum með áþarf að halda. Lögreglumenn tilbúin með blósana. Tilbúinir í háa vitnarstöðu, tilbúinir blósana fram. Tilbúinir blósana. Yes,